Hello and welcome back to our study, Basics of Biblical Archaeology, where we're looking at the archaeological discoveries that relate to the Bible and the field of archaeology and how it helps understand biblical history a lot better. Today, it's lesson 11, where we're going to focus on the site of Lachish, which is an amazing site. If you don't count Hatzor, it's the largest city in all of ancient Canaan. It's an important site because a lot of biblical history is played out in or near the site of Lachish. It's kind of located on the border between the coastal plain of the area of where the Philistines and others were, and then the hill country, which is to its east, where the Israelites end up moving to immediately when they come into the land. So Lachish is in what's called the Shphelah, which the best translation of that in English would be foothills. So that's where it's located, right in the middle between those two areas. The first thing that we want to look at together is the map that shows us where it's located in Israel, and then some shots of the mound itself. Well, here is a map of the land of Israel. You can see that we have the Sea of Galilee here and the Jordan River that flows down into the Dead Sea at the bottom, the Mediterranean Sea on the left, the land of Moab and Ammon to the right, ancient Phoenicia up here to the north-northwest, and the mountain range called the Mount Carmel range right here that goes down to Megiddo, which is a site that we studied in a previous lesson. But at the time of that this map is set, it's set after the Assyrians have conquered the northern kingdom of Israel. So the rest of the tribes outside of mainly Judah have been either conquered completely and the people killed off, or the survivors have gone off, carted away, and were forced to live elsewhere. So these are Assyrian provinces now at this time. And as we go to the south, we move into the land of Judah. And so we have Jerusalem here, the capital, and the capital has stayed. It's afloat at this time, and Judah has its kingdom held there with its headquarters at Jerusalem. And then Lachish is located here. So Lachish basically it guarded the access from the southwest into the central mountain spine and into the kingdom of Judah. So Lachish basically was a guardian, and it was a fortress to be able to make sure that no army could go up into the hill country and attack the capital. So it has a very strategic role that it plays in history, pretty much throughout history. This is a drawing of the entire site of Lachish, an image of the site of Lachish at various periods of time, showing monumental architecture, for example, that's a part of one or another period. So what do we have here? For example, we have an outer revetment wall here that goes around the perimeter. That's number 3. And we have an inner wall here that's suggested to be this course, but we do know for sure that the inner wall was in this position because we have portions of it that are excavated here. So those dark and black areas certainly are parts of that inner wall. Then we have 2 gates as well. We have an outer gate and an inner gate. The outer gate is not really drawn up too well, but the inner gate is, and you can see that it's a 6-chambered gate, which is what we get in the Solomonic period, by the way. Then there are several other important features, such as this, we'll start with this Assyrian siege ramp. So we talked about in 701 BC how Sennacherib went into Judah to attack it and to overtake it. According to his records, he took 46 cities. One of those is Lachish. He tried to get Jerusalem. He didn't do it. But to get Lachish, he had to build a ramp to ascend high enough to be able to access the wall and penetrate it to allow his troops in. So he built a siege ramp here, and then there was a counter siege ramp built here because the Israelites, or the Judites rather, figured that they would be better off if they would counter the building of the siege ramp by making an area that's going to be even higher in elevation than the siege ramp. Because remember, it's all about height. The higher you are, the more advantage you have. And so you can attack people down below And if they're building a siege ramp and you continue to get higher, then you have a strategic advantage to your favor. There are other things on the site, such as the Acropolis Temple that's located here, and then this large structure here, that is the Palace Fort, and that is a very massive structure, a very important one for the city, because essentially all the decisions are made here and all of the political conversations are had within there by the king and his council. Then we have something else here. We have a solar shrine that's located here. And the final thing I'll just point out here is the Phos Temple, located outside the city wall. And yes, that's true. You have a temple that's built outside of the city. We don't even know today as to why that happened. But we just know that this temple, the Phos Temple, was built outside of the city, and it connects us to the time period right before the conquest under Joshua. Because the Phos Temple has its occupation during Late Bronze Age 1. So it's at the end of the Late Bronze Age 1 that Joshua and his forces capture Canaan. But the Phos Temple gives us a material cultural footprint for that very time period right before Joshua and company arrived. Oh, and there's one other thing I will point out here, which is area S. You can see the number 6 here. This is area S, and this is going to become important for our next lesson, where we're going to talk about a very important inscription that was found in 2018 and published in 2021 in area S. So make a mental note of this area right there. Here's an aerial view of the Tell of Lachish looking from the southwest to show you some of the, not only the beauty, but the magnificence and splendor and awe of this site. So you can see how high it raises above the surrounding plain, and it would be very defensible. If you build a wall around this, you have that natural height from this hill, but if you build a wall around it, it's going to be even far more defensible. Then we have this view looking to the north-northeast, and you can see from this view that it's even more daunting of a task to find your way up onto the level of the city unless you take the road and go up the gradually, it's kind of like a ramp, and it is. It's a ramp that goes up to that outer gate area, and then it ascends a little bit further to the final wall, and then the inner gate that's up there. So a very formidable city. And of course, it's in this area that we have the siege ramp built. So this is a drawing, an artist's rendition of what the site would have looked like at the time of the Judites, the Judite kingdom, when the northern tribe of Israel is already gone. So this is after 701 BC, the period early after that. So here we have the outer wall that we saw from above. This is our inner wall here. Lots of homes and so forth that represent building up of communities on top of the Tell. And then this large royal administrative center here, essentially in the center of the site. And of course, this is our ramp leading up to the outer gate to get us access into the city. All right, now let's talk about the occupational history for the site of Lachish. And essentially, what we're going to look at the beginning is the earliest occupation from the Neolithic period all the way down to the Hellenistic period. So this is the occupational history starting in Pottery Neolithic age, where we have a small settlement on the site. The site was still small in the Chalcolithic period, and it's really difficult to know exactly time-wise where this would fit, but that's the Chalcolithic period that ends in roughly 2650 BC, according to my chronological scheme. Then we have the early Bronze Age. There's a settlement already in the northwest in the early Bronze Age, and settlement continues all the way through the early Bronze Age until we have this destruction or the abandonment of the site at some point around 2100 BC. So now we're already moving into the lifetime of Abraham. And of course, he lives mainly during early Bronze Age 4. So there's a new settlement in the northwestern part of the site, and we have evidence of that. It's occupied during the Middle Bronze Age and into the Late Bronze Age. And of course, Late Bronze Age 1b is the time period after which we have this destruction. And that's the time that I and other Christian scholars will connect to the destruction under Joshua. And that is where we will, and it's in this time period, right, this destruction moment, that we'll be looking at the inscription in our next lesson that comes from Lachish. Then in the Late Bronze Age 1b through 2a and 2b, we have a resettlement there. In 1b, there's no city wall, but there are parts of Building 100 that are used in Area S that essentially it's like a squatter's town, and they're building new walls against walls that have survived and making rooms or homes out of them and probably covering them. So it's a very rustic city in Late Bronze Age 1b after the Israelite destruction. But it grows more in time, and it experiences another destruction at the end of Late Bronze Age 2b, which almost certainly is an Israelite destruction, but it's a little bit more elusive and difficult to prove. Then in Iron Age 1a, we have a reoccupation of the site, and this is where the Acropolis temple comes in that we saw in that drawing of that plan of the site. Then there's another destruction that occurs after that, and it's reoccupied in Iron Age 2a and 2b. And that Iron Age 2a is our first Israelite occupation of the site in Iron Age 2a. And so the Israelites continue to occupy the site from that point forward. There's a destruction under Sennacherib that we alluded to before, where we have the siege ramp and the counter siege ramps that are being built. That is the destruction of Iron Age 2b, Lachish, which existed basically from about 780 to 701 BC. Then it's reoccupied and becomes this fortress city in Iron Age 2c. That's the Judite kingdom's version only of the city. In other words, there was no northern kingdom at this time. And then that comes to an unceremonious conclusion with the invasion by Nebuchadnezzar and the Neo-Babylonian army. So it is fortified in the Persian period with an administrative center, but it's nothing like its former self at all. And then in the Hellenistic period as well. So there's the permanent abandonment of the site after the Hellenistic period. Then our focus at this point, we're going to skip through a detailed study of a lot of the periods and jump right into the periods that are a little bit more important to biblical history and what we know. So we'll start with Late Bronze Age 1, which is stratum 1a and 1b, and it's approximately 1560 to 1406 BC. We don't have a lot that we're going to look at here. Just want to show you quickly this beautiful two-handled crater. You can see the exquisite craftsmanship. This is Cypriot, so it's made or crafted in or on the island of Cyprus. It's bichrome, so there's two colors. You can see the black paint, and you can see the remnants of a red paint that's there as well. So decorative, you can see animals in these top registers, so very, very well made. All of this artistry, of course, comes after the firing of the vessel, so it's painted on after that is concluded. This dates either to late in Late Bronze Age 1a or early in Late Bronze Age 2b. I'm sorry, it dates to either late in Late Bronze Age 1a or early in Late Bronze Age 1b, not 2b. And again, around 1500 to 1450 BC is the time period for this crater. So its use at Lachish is 50 years or so, or a little bit more, before the Israelites arrive and sack the city. Then, in that same occupational level, we have this very important inscription. This is the 2018 excavated inscription that we can call the Lachish Milk Bowl Ostracon. We'll get to it more. Its fine spot is here in Area S, right inside, and here's the city wall here. It's just inside the city wall. So this map basically has a demonstration of the wall, building 100, and the fine spot in this room right here. So more in our next lesson on that one. Let's talk now about stratum 6 at Lachish. This is Lachish of the Late Bronze Age 2B through Iron Age 1A. The time period is roughly 1305 BC to about 1130 BC for its occupation. And we'll start with inscriptions again, because you know how much I really enjoy inscriptions and how important they are to our understanding of the ancient peoples. Unfortunately, this inscription is a partial inscription, so we don't have the whole inscription. There would have been more for sure going this way, and probably more going this way, although probably not anything else expected above. But possibly a little bit more to this direction as well. This is an inscription that, no doubt about it, is Proto-Consonantal Hebrew. And if you read my first book, The World's Oldest Alphabet, you see how I document the origin of that script from the 19th century BC, going all the way down until 587, when the Babylonian captivity takes place. And so fitting within that range is this inscription that's after the Exodus, that's after the conquest, and the Israelites are continuing to live in the land. At some point, this Hebrew inscription shows up in the Canaanite city of Lachish, which suggests to us, and this isn't the only such inscription, but it suggests to us that the Israelites and the residents of Lachish, the Canaanites or whoever they were who lived here, there was some kind of relationship going on. Israelites at some points were able to go in and probably do business, and at some point, most likely a Hebrew person walked into the city and deposited this inscription for whatever reason, and so it demonstrates that relationship that's going on between the two peoples. This is a drawing of the Acropolis temple from stratum 6. It reconstructs the entryway to the temple here, and then the inner chamber of the temple, or the cella, which has two pillars in the center, which suggests to us that it was roofed, almost undoubtedly. And then there were chambers back in here, probably for storage, or where the priests would work or perform functions, but the deity would have been up in this area, probably inside this niche. Then, as I mentioned, there are other inscriptions that are found at the site that aren't of a local people's language. So undoubtedly, this is another Hebrew inscription that's probably a little bit later in time. It's from it's probably later in stratum 6. There's only a small part of the inscription that's actually extant, that has survived. The majority of the rest of it is broken off, and it was never found by the archaeologists. But this much is for sure visible. So we have the letter P here, which is our P sound. This is a kaf. It's a hand, and so that's the K sound. This is a shepherd's crook, kind of bent. So that's the L letter, the L sound. This it could be one of two things. Most likely that is a Rosh or an R sound. This is another Pe. It's a half of a mouth. And the word mouth in Hebrew is Pe. And so when they see the mouth, they pronounce the P sound. So at this point, they're only drawing half of the mouth, and there it is on the inscription. So some of the letters are visible. Others are more difficult to read and to decipher. This one, of course, being very difficult to understand what they're drawing here, because that's not a standard writing of any of the 22 Proto-Consonantal Hebrew letters. But this is from area BB, and it shows you the continued interaction that Israelites are having with the residence of Lachish. Lots of Hebrew inscriptions found from various periods at the site of Lachish, and not just the ones I've shown you today. This is essentially just a blow-up of that same image. Now you can see some of the letters more carefully. You can see the corner of the mouth, for example, and the head and neck, body. So that's really, at this point, the body, and the head of the R sound, or the rosh, meaning head, because rosh is the Hebrew word for head. Another mouth letter here, a peh. So those are some of the letters on the inscription. Now we want to turn to stratum 5. This is Iron Age 2A, approximately 1000 BC to 841 BC. And this represents the time period of, this is Iron Age 2A, but it's the 10th century when, remember, it's 1002 BC that David ascends onto the throne. So this is the occupational phase that's first representing the inhabitation by the Israelites, where they're building something on the site. And speaking of which, here is something that they're building on the site. This is the excavation of the Israelite sanctuary. Obviously, this dates back to the 20th century when the excavation was done, and they're still in the process of the excavation, but you can see they've already excavated a good portion of it over here. This is cultic room 49 in the temple, with temple 116 behind it. So there would have been cultic activity that took place here, some kind of worship activity going on. There were vessels that were left behind, probably when the city was destroyed, and so the cultic vessels would have just fallen over if they weren't purposefully smashed or broken or harmed in some way. So this is exactly as they were left by the ancient people. This is why we use the term in situ. As it was left by the ancients, we're the first ones, we the archaeologists, the first to come upon it and dig it up and let it be seen for the first time since then. These are some of the vessels as they've been restored that come from this cultic area. You can see this cylindrical one here, a bowl, and lots of bowls or chalices, some jugs here. So some of the cultic implements from the actual worship site there. This was probably used as an altar, also from Locus 49. It's stone, undoubtedly, and it was hewn at the top to be able to be a surface on which a priest could take an animal, set the animal up there, and end its life on top of the cultic altar. This is a large sacred stone, a matzebah, located in this cultic facility with a rounded heap of black ashes around it. And this is the area of the ashes, and that represents where there was this olive tree trunk that was an Asherah. So the fertility god who became the god that the Israelites worshiped the most in the land of Israel, and that, of course, is Baal. We talked about him already in earlier lessons. Baal had a consort, a wife, if you will, a she-god, a she-deity. And that in most cultic environments, in most cities, Baal's consort was Asherah. And that, of course, goes back to Mesopotamian religion, which over there is Ishtar, the god of the morning, and we see her depicted with the morning star. So Venus is her star, and she's also the goddess of war. So in the Levant, she's called Astarte or Ashtoreth, and this is a representation of her here at the site where this stump essentially was used for worship, and it was burned up either in the destruction or at some other point. And that takes us then to stratum 3, which is dating from 780 to 701 BC. This is stratum 3, or Iron Age 2B on the site, after the initial Israelite phase there. So this is a reconstruction of Lachish's city gate. Remember, we talked about that outer city gate that wasn't depicted well on that overall artist's rendition of what the site would have looked like, but here is a much more detailed envisioning of what that would have been. So you see the two towers, two massive towers here on the outside, and then inner tower here. And then this would be the access point. So this is the ramp coming from below as you ascend onto or toward the city, and you enter into the outer gate through here, enter into this area, this transitional area, and then the inner gate through here. So this is from Lachish's Stratum 3, a very important time in its history. Well, the city of this period is engulfed in a destruction by Sennacherib, a fierce attack on the city. And he talks about it in this, the Sennacherib prism. And in this account, he says this in his own words: "As to Hezekiah the Jew, he did not submit to my yoke. I laid siege to 46 of his strong cities, walled forts, and to the countless small villages in their vicinity, and conquered them." So he's claiming to have conquered 46, at this point at least, of the cities of Judah. And one of them is Lachish. So here's our site, the site of Lachish. Now you can see it in a much smaller format. So that's the site of Lachish. Here is the ramp that we've talked about before, the inner gate entering into the city. Well, where did the Assyrians camp? This right here is their encampment, and we know it because the archaeological record bears it out. Their camp was situated right here, and they were here for a considerable time to besiege the city, to overtake it. So if their camp's here, obviously day to day, their army would be heading toward the Tel or toward the mound, the city of Lachish, and building that siege ramp, probably using slaves to do it. They wouldn't have put their own soldiers up against this because they could be killed by Israelites above who are firing at them with bows and slings and arrows and so forth. So that is where the Neo-Assyrians encamped. And this shows you now, as you're walking from the Neo-Assyrian encampment and you're ready to work on attacking the city, here's your view of the site of Lachish. It would have been a formidable site to see it before they ever started the building of the siege ramp. This shows you kind of a cross-section of the siege ramp itself. So this is a portion of the longitudinal section at the southwestern corner of the Tel, showing number 1, the first stage of the siege. So they're building the ramp and making essentially a flat area here that they can build on further, and they can accomplish work on this platform here. And then in the second phase, this is the outer revetment wall here. So they're building up to this area. The third stage is here, the siege ramp extending all the way to the main city wall, the inner wall. And 4 is that main city wall. And then 5 is the counter siege ramp that's built by the Israelites, that is built inside the city, elevating higher than the city wall itself to be able to attack the Assyrians who are looking to get into their city. And this is what it would look like some decades ago if you were to approach this and see this siege ramp in a black and white photo. So the siege ramp is at the right, and the counter siege ramp with its city gate are in front of the counter siege ramp. This now is looking from within the Tel itself at the counter siege ramp that's built. So this is the corner of the ramp where the Israelites are building up the ramp. And the city gate is at the far right. So the Israelites are working day and night to build up a counter siege ramp to stop the Assyrians from entering the city at this point. This is a photo that I took in 2007 when I visited the site, showing you at that point at least part of that siege ramp from the ground level. So some of it already had been excavated, but there's plenty of siege ramp left because it's just an enormous piece of ground. This is a man standing on a ladder, and you can see it's extending very far down, and it's a cross-section, essentially, of this counter-siege ramp inside the city wall. So it's showing you how extensive just the counter-siege ramp alone is. So as the Neo-Assyrians are building their siege ramp, this is extending higher and higher. Lots of dirt and gravel and stone and so forth just constantly being dumped in there. I'm sure they would have given their arm or their leg for a dump truck and maybe a backhoe to be able to move dirt quickly into that area. This shows you a picture of some of the weapons that were left behind because the Neo-Assyrians were attacking them and with arrows. And so these are bronze arrows in most cases and a bone arrow in one case here in the bottom center. These are some of the sling balls from the slingshots that would have been fired by the Assyrians. You can see in the far right there is a depiction of a Neo-Assyrian soldier with a sling, hoisting it above his head and swinging it and unleashing that sling ball. So these are the powerful sling balls of the most formidable army on the planet at the time, the Neo-Assyrian army. This is room 36 at Nineveh. It's known as the Lachish room. So this is in the Neo-Assyrian Empire. It's one of their important cities, the city of Nineveh. And of course, we know about that from the book of from Jonah. But in there, they had a depiction of the conquest of the site of Lachish. So there are images that are against the walls in this room to display the victory from their perspective, from their vantage point, their conquest of the city. So this is the entrance to this Lachish room. You can see the winged man-headed bulls that are just spectacular and enormous in size. Here's a person in contrast to that standing winged bull. So to enter into this is to enter the greatest extravagance of the ancient world at the time. And so this is one of those images that's on at Nineveh, those reliefs against the wall, depicting the Neo-Assyrian camp. And so it's essentially showing a more or less a circular design of their camp. It represents the Neo-Assyrians that are within it. The chariots that they would have brought to the battle, and other, part of the battle that's taking place here. This shows you an image of some of the siege, some of the fighting that's going on. There's a soldier here with a sword, a soldier here with a shield, a soldier here with a shield and a spear most likely, or a javelin of some kind. You can see bowmen here firing arrows from a bow and arrow, or from a bow at the very base, and you can see the angle at which he's pointed. So there's a steep angle that has to be overcome. So he's got gravity to deal with to be able to fire the arrow to try to hit some of the enemies. There were ladders that were set up against the city when they got high enough with their siege ramp. So that's a depiction of a ladder and a person shooting from the ladder, climbing the ladder, etc. So the walls of the city are here above. So the citadel here with the defense. So the defenders would have been on top here, shooting down from below, looking to take out as many Assyrians as they could. This is a picture of Sennacherib, King Sennacherib, as he was enthroned at the battle, watching. And he, of course, didn't participate in the battle. He was far away in safety, and he had attendants such as this who were fanning him in these cases and so forth. So he was sitting on his throne. He brought his own throne, undoubtedly from Assyria, all the way from there, and he would have watched the battle take place. And this, again, is in 701 BC. One of the worst parts of the battle is the way that the Israelites would have died in this process. Assyrians were well known in the ancient world for using impaling. So they would take a person and a pole with a sharp end on it, impale the person and stick the person up as a display, right? You see the people below, they're erecting this one, and they would be on display essentially as dead victims to demonstrate for anyone who would come by to look and see that you do not mess with the Assyrians, because if you do, this will be your fate too. Another image of the depiction, you can see better the defenders here in their tower above, firing down with bows and arrows and having helmets on at the time to protect their heads from attack. Also depicts a siege engine that the Neo-Assyrians would have used. So the siege engine protects them from enemy attack, and it also has a huge spear-like pointed object that is going to be able to penetrate and strike the wall to weaken the wall so that they could put a hole in it and gain access, and their men could rush inside the city. All right, so then we go to stratum 2. This is the final Iron Age city, the Iron Age 2C city, and its occupation is roughly from 630 BC to 587 BC. This shows you what it would have looked like in the area after the Neo-Assyrians had conquered all of Israel and most of the ancient Near East too. So everything in the light blue here represents the provinces of the Neo-Assyrian Empire. And they would have named them according to whatever name they thought was fitting, such as Hauran, which we do read about in the Bible. Gilead, we know about Gilead from Scripture as well. Damascus, Sidon, Tyre, Megiddo, Dor, Philistia, Samaria. So the center of the Israelite kingdom would have been here earlier in the area of Samaria. And then below, you can see in a different color, this pinkish color, is Judah. So that is the still alive southern kingdom of Judah. This is the plan of the Neo-Assyrian residency that was built in Neo-Assyrian style at the site after their conquest of the city of Lachish. With this map, we see essentially the attacks later now by the Neo-Babylonians as they're going to work toward defeating the final occupation of Judites here and complete the conquest of the rebuilt city. And as the Neo-Babylonians were approaching the area of Jerusalem and the other cities around it, they were conquering one after another. So the final two that hung around were Lachish and Azekah. And we read about this in Jeremiah 34, where it says, "When the army of the king of Babylon was fighting against Jerusalem and against all the remaining cities of Judah, that is, Lachish and Azekah, for they alone remained as fortified cities of Judah." So essentially at this moment that Jeremiah is composing this, there are three main cities, three large established cities that are still alive and thriving and in the hands of the Judites. One is Jerusalem, two is Azekah, and three is Lachish. Only three left. So we're narrowing down. And Lachish stands because of its defensibility and its importance as a defensive city for the Judite kingdom. Well, do you remember that entryway when we go up the ramp into the city and we have that outer gate area? In that complex, right here in this guard room, was discovered something very important to biblical history, which is the Lachish letters. These are Hebrew letters that are written to document this time period when the Judites were facing potential extinction at the hand of the Neo-Babylonian army. And so these letters that were being written, they were preserved in this guardhouse. And some of them are very insightful. In fact, here is an artist's rendition of that guardhouse where they would have been stored or found. So that's where the Lachish letters are. This is a more modern view of that part of the site, you can see where the letters were discovered by Starkey in more modern times. And there he is, James Starkey, pointing to the very fine spot of these inscriptions after the fact, after he had already excavated here. So this is Lachish letter 4 that's written on both sides, side 1 and side 2. And Lachish letter 4 is important on a number of lines, one of which is because it mentions the covenant name of God that we read about in Scripture, Yahweh, literally, which means he who is, or the one who goes on existing, and it's written right here, Yah-H-W-H, Yahweh. So this is on Lachish letter 4, providing an ancient Hebrew attestation on their own to the God of the people. Then on Lachish letter 4 is written this, also let my Lord know that we are watching for the signals of Lachish, according to all the indications that my Lord has given, because we cannot see Azekah. When Jeremiah wrote, Azekah was still alive. Now the people at Lachish are looking for signal fires and smoke to show that Lachish is still there, but they see, that Azekah is still there, but they don't see anything. So at this point, only Lachish has not fallen to the Neo-Babylonians and Jerusalem. Here's what we read about in Jeremiah chapter 13. Say to the king and the queen mother, take a lowly seat, for your beautiful crown has come down from your head. The cities of the Negev have been locked up, and there is no one to open them. All of Judah has been carried into exile, wholly carried into exile. So this represents a point even further in the future than Lachish letter 4. Now Lachish has fallen, and eventually Jerusalem itself has fallen. We're down to nothing left of the Judite kingdom. So at this point, it documents the destruction of the Judite monarchy. And the survivors, those who weren't killed by Nebuchadnezzar's forces, they were carted off into Babylonia and would have lived out the rest of their lives there. We have some remains of that Babylonian invasion, such as these Scythian arrowheads that were found in Jerusalem. Well, if you look to the far right, that drawing is of a three-sided Scythian arrowhead from Lachish. So the very same kind of arrowhead, the Scythian three-sided arrowhead that we find at Jerusalem, is also found at Lachish. So this demonstrates the continuity between the attacks by the Neo-Assyrians at both sites. So the Neo-Babylonians would have had a vast kingdom, as you can see here, which includes the land that was previously occupied by the Judites in southern Canaan. This is the Gedaliahu Bula from a seal, and it says, it reads here in Hebrew, this is the final stage of Proto-Consonantal Hebrew at this point, where it reads, belonging to Gedaliahu, who is over the house. After the Neo-Assyrian conquest of Judah, the Babylonians placed the surviving non-deportees under the rule of a man named Gedaliah, the son of Ahikam, and it says this in 2 Kings chapter 25. Now, as for the people who were left in the land of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had left, he appointed Gedaliah, the son of Ahikam, the son of Shaphan, over them. So the possibility is strong that Gedaliahu, who is over the house, that man that we saw represented in that seal inscription that was found, is that very Gedaliah, the son of Ahikam, who was elevated to the position of governor of the surviving Judites who were not deported to Babylonia with those who were exiled. Usishkin, who was one of the main excavators at the site of Lachish, noted that David Geringer and Benjamin Sass have supported this connection, connecting Gedaliah, this governor, with Gedaliahu, who's depicted in this inscription. So all of this shows physical attestation to the conquest of Lachish as part of first the attack by the Neo-Assyrians and then by the Neo-Babylonians, demonstrating that these events we read about in Scripture can come to life through archaeology. Thanks, and we'll see you next time in our course on Basics of Biblical Archaeology.